Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to you and welcome to the latest in our series of Doha debates sponsored by the Qatar Foundation. It may not look much like it, but tonight we're in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, not the location where we had hoped to film, but in a private TV studio. The fact is that the Egyptian government summarily withdrew our permission to film in the old city 2 nights before the debate, and then apparently discouraged an alternative location from hosting us. Someone, it seems, did not wish this debate to take place. We're here, though, and we're in good heart tonight, and our topic is highly sensitive: the role of the military in post-revolution Egypt. Last month, it widened and extended emergency powers amid allegations of continuing torture in military prisons and complaints that military trials of civilians have been unfair. But the general's rule is, by all accounts, extremely popular in the country. A recent poll gave them an approval rating of more than 90%. Many credit them with holding the country together at a time of extreme danger and claim that for now, no one else is capable of running this huge and complex country. What do you think? Well, our motion tonight is controversial, but as always, it's designed to ensure a fair debate. This House believes that the Egyptian military is not interested in genuine reform, and our panelists, as you might expect, disagree fundamentally on the issue. Speaking for the motion, Mohamed Menza, founding member of the recently formed Missa al-Haraya Egypt Freedom Party, and with him, Heba Moraya, researcher in the Middle East and Africa Division of Human Rights Watch. Speaking against the motion, General Sameh Seif El-Yazal, chairman of the Al-Gomuriya Center for Political and Security Studies. And with him, Gamal Abdel Gawad Sultan, professor of political science at the American University of Cairo, and former director of the Al-Ahram Center for Political and Strategic Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our panel. So now let me please ask Mohamed Menza to speak for the motion.
Thanks, Tim. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. As we start our debate, we should ask ourselves, what do we mean by real and genuine reform? Isn't it a process that leads to a radical and positive change in the state and the society in order to improve the poor social, economic, and political conditions under which Egyptians lived for decades? A clear-cut divide with the forces, tactics, and strategies of the ancient regime, which have led to the Egypt that we knew on the eve of January 24th. If so, what has the SCAF done on the path of attaining such change? Not much, I'm afraid. If we look at the economic sphere, we'll find that the continuing fragile status of the security meant that investment and tourism sectors, which are both vital for the Egyptian economy, are still badly hurt with no signs of improvements. In the social sphere, freedoms of speech are targeted, censorship is encroaching on the various forms of expression, and the rights of the Copts, among other minorities and groups in the society, continue to be neglected. Politically speaking, and apart from the proclaimed commitment to uphold the elections free and fair, which is questionable, of course, if we take into account the context under which such elections will be held, the SCAF has barely allowed for any active political participation in decision-making processes from various political and social forces, let alone set a clear timeline for a transitional phase which is now expected to last for more than 2 years. This all goes to show that the military is not really interested in giving up much powers to the people, or any power actually to the people. At the moment they have legislative and to a great extent also executive powers, with a considerably weak government currently in place and a fragmented parliament that is expected to be formed. As the monopolizers of the only institutional entity that's capable of exercising the use of force and which has given a good deal of legitimacy from the people after January 25th, the military has been delegated with the responsibility of attaining the objectives of the revolution: bread, freedom, social justice, and human dignity. And now, after more than 8 months from the fall of the previous regime, one can safely say that they haven't put the country on the path of attaining these objectives. Ladies and gentlemen, it is for these reasons that we call you today to vote for this motion, that the House believes that the military is not really interested in pivoting for real or genuine change in Egypt. Thank you.
Mohamed Menza, thank you very much indeed. You were calling for radical and positive change. You don't notice any change? The proliferation of political parties in this country now, the free vote that's taking place, the former dictator and his family put on trial, people tried with corruption. All this necessary steps towards democracy, all this has been guided by the military rulers, and has happened on their watch with their agreement and their active participation. How can you say nothing has changed?
I don't think that we're debating for the fact that positive change has taken place after the ousting of President Mubarak.
But they've spearheaded it, haven't they? The military has spearheaded this change.
I think every single bit of positive change that happened in this country was earned by the people of this country, and it was not given by the military.
But if it wasn't given by the military, they're certainly not standing against it. So they're showing no signs of wanting to interrupt the process towards democracy. If they're allowing all these political parties to function, free votes to take place, you can have elections.
There are a lot of signs, on the other hand, that show that the military, as we just said and as we will say throughout this episode, are not really interested in pivoting for other positive change.
But how much do you expect in 9 months? How much do you expect?
I expect a lot more.
Look at the political dialogue and the space for political dialogue in this country compared to what it was.
What we're debating here today, Tim, is
reform. We're debating a genuine reform. Is the military interested in it? It's taking place with their full agreement and backing.
I'm not sure that this is with the full agreement.
And now the authority, which is the military government in this country, the military authorities, are standing back and saying, go ahead, have your political parties, have your elections.
Well, have
elections. Put the old leaders on trial. I don't see what your complaint is, that in 9 months I would have thought that was a lot of positive reformist change.
I don't think so, because at the same time in which we're witnessing political opening, we're also witnessing other forms of restrictions on freedom of expression, restriction on political action. And it's not just enough to have a cosmetic process of having some so-called political entities that have not been given the time and have also been exposed to a lot of pressure from the military and from the authorities on their actions and activities throughout the country.
All right, Mohamed Menza, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now let me call on General Saif Al-Yazal to speak against the motion, please.
Thank you very much. I just want to remind you, if you remember 1st of February, when the SCAF came and they announced the first message to the public of Egypt. They said, we're going to protect the revolution. We will not fire any bullet against any Egyptian. Number 3, they want the regime to be changed. Remember the date, it's 1st of February. Mubarak was still there. Just imagine that if Mubarak will not leave the power on the 11th of February, what is going to happen, or what will happen to these guys? Execution, I'm sure. They took the risk and they insisted that they will support the revolution, whatever the result is after that. This is number 1. Number 2, what they did in the 9 months. I'm going to highlight very important issues, and I'll leave the rest maybe during the questions. If you remember, parties in Egypt, if you'd like to form a party in Egypt, you have to go through a very difficult procedures. You have to go to a committee, which 99% of the time they refuse to form a new party. Now, you don't need to go to anywhere. You just send a piece of paper to announce that I'm going to form that party. Easy and simple. 49 parties now in Egypt. There were 24, now 48, 49 today, I think, in no time. Easy to go. Democracy. Again, as soon as they took power, what they did, first thing, this assembled the General Assembly, the parliament, because everybody was complaining it was not fair election. Same thing for Shura, democracy. Then no more old parliament, no more old Shura council. Constitution, everybody was complaining about constitution, because Mubarak actually tailored that constitution for his needs. No limits for presidency, forever, lifetime. What they did, SCAF, they changed the constitution, referendum took place to take the opinion of the people, you agree or not, and first item they deleted that particular one. Everybody was complaining about it, everybody in Egypt. Thank you for the time, Tim.
General Saif Al-Yazal, thank you very much indeed. If the military is so keen on democracy, and you've talked about the political parties, why the need to torture people in military prisons, to have forced virginity tests on women who were taken into military captivity?
That was not really true. Let me tell you. Yes, many people, they're talking about that. Not a single case went to a hospital and they came with a certificate, medical certificate saying...
But we saw the pictures, a video posted online, September 28th, showing members of the army and security forces beating and electrocuting detainees. Why is that necessary if the military is as popular as it seems to be in this country?
First of all, I don't trust any videotape because you can put things and you can delete things and you can, the software now.
But would you trust Major General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of the Supreme Council, who said, in answer to questions which were put to him by Amnesty International, he said the culture of the army needed changing and orders had been given now not to abuse detainees. That suggests that something seriously wrong was happening.
I'm not denying that nothing happened, but first of all, they actually agreed that another video came and the SCAF, they mentioned that they are questioning officers participating in that particular issue.
But such behavior really undermines.
Yeah, but virginity is something else. Virginity, I'm still very hesitant to believe it. Believe me.
And the military trials of civilians, 11,000 trials of civilians, was that really necessary if the military is committed to democracy and reform?
They were more than 11.
More than 11,000.
To be frank with you.
So four times the number under the Mubarak era.
I'll tell you why.
Sign of democracy?
There's a reason for that. Yes, definitely, yes. I'll tell you why. Normal procedures takes a long time. And we know that Egyptian justice is very slow. And I mean, everybody knows that. You have thugs, you have arms in between illegal hands, you have instability, you have security is not in a good place. So what you usually do, if you arrest one of these guys and send them to the court, you have to wait 2 years.
Okay, well, I'm sure people, yes. I need to stop you, I'm sure.
I am against the military, civilian to go to military court. There's no question about
I'm sure we're going to have a lot of discussion on this subject.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Now let me please ask Heba Morayev to speak for the motion.
This military isn't interested in real reform because this military doesn't understand what reform means. On March 9th, 190 peaceful protesters were arrested, were taken to the grounds of the Egyptian Museum. They were beaten, they were whipped, they were given electroshocks, the 17 women included. The next day, on March 10th, at the military prison, 7 of those women were subjected to forced virginity tests. In this context, that amounts to sexual assault. The military subsequently formally denied this, but we have off-the-record admissions, we have admissions from reliable sources within the military that this occurred, and we have an implicit recognition to us when in a meeting with the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces that this was something that they were investigating. One of those women has filed a complaint before the military prosecutor and another complaint before the Council of State. And until this day, that complaint hasn't gone anywhere because the military prosecutor is saying he is still waiting for the results of the investigation from the military prison to arrive. What we have here is a situation where the military has not only conducted exactly the same abusive practices of the Mubarak regime, which led to the January 25th uprising in the first place, but we also have the second element which caused that anger on January 25th, which is impunity. Until this moment, not a single military officer has been investigated or prosecuted for the acts of torture which took place not only on March 9th, but on subsequent cases, for the excessive use of force which occurred on a number of different occasions and protests leading up to the latest and very tragic incident at Maspero, where army vehicles ran over 21 individuals. Not talking about how that started, that in and of itself is evidence. I think beyond this, what this impunity shows is that the army doesn't realize that a break with the past means that people were longing for the promotion of respect for the rule of law. What they wanted was to end the position of the police above the law, the feeling that police officers could get away with it. And yet instead what we have right now is military officers who are in that same position. We have a military that doesn't understand what rule of law means, what reforming this country means. Instead, they not only reactivated the emergency law, they expanded it to beyond what we had under Mubarak. 12,000 military trials of civilians, a position that every human rights organization is completely against, because no civilian should be tried before a judge who responds to his military superior. And we have masses of examples of individuals given very short trial. The failure to prioritize the rule of law, the failure to actually reform the police, to address police abuse, to investigate any police officers for torture, all of this shows a desire to protect the status quo and not to really reform the system.
Heba Morayev, thank you very much indeed. You say the army wants to protect the status quo. Who was it that pushed out Mubarak? if it wasn't the army?
The army, I believe, made a conscious decision, which was clearly something that they'd been thinking about for a while. They've said this in subsequent statements, that they didn't like Mubarak's
Yes, but
plans
they were the ones who did it.
Of course.
They were the ones who did it.
Of course.
It wasn't the people in the streets. It was the military.
The people in the street initiated it, and this is partially a soft coup, which is the problem that we're facing today. This was in the military's interests, and since then they've portrayed themselves as protectors of the revolution while trying to
but how much reform do you think you would be seeing in this country if the military hadn't brought it about and wasn't actively promoting it? How many political parties? How many prisoners would you still be seeing? Political prisoners in jail?
Well, we have
12,000
parties,
but how many banned parties would there still be if the military hadn't brought about the new
the party
situation?
Establishment. The turning point was June and July of this year. Initially, the military was giving some space, and then people started criticizing them, and they didn't like it. So they started arresting bloggers. They started summoning people on charges of insulting the military. They started interfering with the media.
I think they've already admitted that they needed to change their culture. They've only had 9 months.
No, and they're planning to stay until June 2013, and we can't afford this. We can't afford to have Maspero happen again.
But look at what has happened in the 9 months that they've had. Look at the people who've been put on trial. The old dictator and his family put on trial. Ministers brought before the courts on charges of corruption. I mean, how much can you do in 9 months?
There hasn't been a process of institutional reform.
And who else is there anyway?
And the problem here is that the military is centralizing all decision-making power in its hands.
Who else is there?
Government, the civilian
what
government.
Civilian government?
The caretaker government where reform-minded ministers have been unable to actually implement.
And is that why the people are voting 90% in favor of the army?
The army has
that's
been
what
very
that's what they
successful
think
at
of the parties, isn't it?
Speak to any political activist, anyone in a political party who's been trying to negotiate with the SCAF over the past months to actually get the SCAF to listen to what's in the interest of political parties. The SCAF does not consult. The SCAF does not involve people in its decisions. And the SCAF is clinging to power. And this is the fear.
Abba Marayev, thank you very much indeed. Now, please let me ask Gamal Abdul Gawad Sultan to speak against the motion.
The motion is about reform, and I believe we shouldn't deal with reform in the abstract terms. We should be dealing with reform within a specific background, a specific complex political and social reality in this country. This reality that was created in the aftermath of the 25th of January revolution, those revolutionary developments early in the year unleashed a number of major trends. I would identify 3 of them, and within them we can judge what kind of role is played by the army in this environment. One trend is political reform. There is approaching democracy. After the collapse of the Mubarak's regime, the dismantlement of the, at least momentarily, the machine of oppression of Mubarak's regime and the repoliticization of large segment of the Egyptian society, the political landscape in Egypt has changed, and definitely a possibility of reversal, of going back to some sort of authoritarian regime like that of Mubarak is impossible, and democratization is a must and inevitable in this country. A second trend here is the rise of the Islamic forces of all kinds, moderate Islamists and radical Islamists, and I would say that Islamists have been the biggest winner of those changes and developments have taken place in the country early in the year. And the third trend is the bringing the military back to the center stage of politics in Egypt. The military in the past decades in Egypt have been always there, but somewhere over the horizon now it is back to the center stage. Trend number 1 is positive, possibility for democratization. The other two trends, Islamism and the military, I would say are not really conducive for democratization. The major challenge that we are facing in this country is the weakness and the fragmentation and disorganization of the genuine democratic civil forces in the country, liberals and left, and some sort of balance, of role of balancing is needed, and this is the role that is the military is playing in Egypt right now, leading it towards some sort of a gradual reform in a safe way, not to allow some specific actor to exercise hegemony over the rest of the country.
Professor Sultan, thank you very much indeed. where is the military leading the country when it keeps changing the dates of elections and refuses to lift the emergency powers, which was their promise and was the major demand of the revolutionaries, wasn't it?
Well, there is a learning experience the military is going through, and also the other political forces
You're
are
saying,
going through
you're saying that
same learning
the military don't
experience.
understand what they've been asked to do by the revolutionaries.
The thing here is, if I look at the demands that were made at the military after the revolution, there were demands to extend the transitional period for the military
They
to
promised
stay in power for
elections
longer
to
now.
civilian rule in 6 months.
And there was demand and the criticism made by liberal forces, and many people of reform mind wanted the military to stay longer in power to allow the new parties a bigger chance to organize, to reach for the grassroots.
But this is just 1952 again, isn't it? The military comes in, promises a swift transition to democratic civilian rule. 6 decades later, you're stuck with the military.
Luckily,
it's just the same,
a
isn't
replica of 1952 is impossible. The Egyptian society has changed. There is no room now for a new authoritarian regime in Egypt.
But what are people to make of the fact that they keep giving deadlines and then changing them when they feel like it,
this is
without consulting anybody?
This is a part of the messy situation we are living in Egypt right now, and definitely this is part of
just
the
a messy
management
situation. It's a bit
strategy.
more than a messy situation. The army knows perfectly well what it's doing. It's been in power for 60 years.
I don't think so. I think believing that somebody
might be the most
almighty
experienced
knowing
politicians in this
proved
country.
wrong with the failure and the collapse of the Mubarak regime. Egypt is so complex to be controlled by any one entity, including the army, and assuming that much part of the army, I think, will not be fair to understanding the reality, not to the army itself.
All right, Professor Sultan, thank you very much indeed.
Tim, can I have a comment, please?
Can I ask you to have a comment in a little while, in the course of the questions? Otherwise, we'd have to change the format and give it to everybody. Can I just remind everybody that the motion we're discussing tonight, this House believes the Egyptian military is not interested in genuine reform. We're ready to take your questions. There's a lady at the back there.
My question goes to those against the motion. How committed is the military to paving the way for any economic reform? Because we've seen that poverty is one of the major factors that impedes the transition to democracy. And as a result, we haven't seen that at all. We haven't seen any signs of any kind of support the military is giving or any roadmap that's allowing to happen economically on economic ground.
Okay, Professor Sultan.
I don't think we should expect and we should demand economic reform from the military. The military should be here for the briefest period of time possible, and this is up to us, to the civil society and different political ideological forces to debate what kind of political reform you are needing. Political reform is a very big word.
You're saying the military shouldn't bother with the economy?
I think, and we shouldn't demand that from them. It is
they
our
rule the
job
country.
Who is?
They rule the country. They shouldn't be bothered about the economy.
Their mission is to
They've
take
got 40
us
million poor people in this country.
Their job is to take us from here to a functioning political representative system. This is their function, and it is our role.
We won't get there unless people have food in their stomach, will
Just
we?
keep the things going, provide food for people, keep the economy going, but reform towards which ideological lines, which policy lines. This is not something that we should
Okay,
demand
I want the
from
questioner to come back and have a say on that. What do you feel about that answer that you got?
I'm not convinced at all, and as we've seen right now, at the moment, right before elections, we've seen a lot of demonstrations that are taking the same form that there's strikes more than anything else, including the ones inside the actual military of interior, which is pretty interesting that, yes, people do need to be guaranteed somehow. They need to see a roadmap economically for them to be able to even think or make up their mind about which political party they want to belong to, or whatever it is.
Even in this transition period?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If the military said that it wants to make sure that there is democracy and democratic transition, which first step is elections, then people have to be able to be convinced to participate in elections, and in order for them to participate in elections, they have to be able to be reassured economically.
Yes, General Lezard, do you want to answer that?
I'll give you an example. Economy is a very crucial thing, and we have a big issue, and it has to be solved. But it's not a kind of problem which you can solve in 24 hours, or a couple of months, or even 8 months. The issue is big, and you need time to do it. I'm not saying that you don't have to do it. You have to do it yesterday, starting from yesterday. Not
But have you
from
done
today.
anything about it? I'm sorry.
I'm telling you, we have 8 million civil servants in this country working for government, all right? 90% of them, they're taking salaries like 300 and 400 pounds a month, which is nothing. It's less than $100. Not fair. And these guys, they're doing double shift somewhere. That's why they go in the morning, they don't work because they know that they have to go on a night shift, they have to work. So they're giving you 10% of their power in the morning, and then
I need to bring
very
in
quickly,
somebody
very
else,
quickly.
because there's a lot of questions
if
here.
you'd like to give them 4,000 pounds a month to be happy, and that is the normal fare, you need 24 billion Egyptian pounds a month to satisfy them.
Okay,
this is kind of
Mohammed
problem we have.
Mansa. Mohammed
Thanks.
Mansa.
I just want to thank Dr. Gamal really for raising this point, because this is exactly the kind of discourse that the military is championing. They're saying that do not care about the economy now. We cannot really pay much attention to social justice. What we will do is that we will give you a parliament, which will be expectedly a fragmented parliament. We'll give you a constitution in a year, and then we'll give you a president God knows when. And we're supposed to sit there and watch for the actions of the military. Ladies and gentlemen, what's happening right now, this is a clear case of bad management. You know, the management of this country right now is in turmoil. The ministries are not being able to perform as they should, and it doesn't seem that there's a plan for this country. You know, what these people in the factories, in the farms all over Egypt, what they're requesting is a clear timeline, a plan. People are not expecting that tomorrow they'll wake up and everything will be great. You know, people are not really that naive. What they want is a plan, a clear-cut strategy for reforming
We're
this
going to
country.
take another
This is not
question.
happening.
We're going to take another question. Lady in the second row, please.
Thank you very much. My question here is, why are we trying to compromise again? Our generation have compromised for a long time. Then those youth came and made a revolution. We're trying again to compromise. I understand why should we permit the military to continue. Military by nature, by breeding, are not qualified for political process and for running this country. Let's move to a civilian government, a civilian rule, and we'll take the risk. And in that case...
So your question is what? Why are they still in power?
Yeah, why are we still trying to give excuses? We'll take the risk of a civilian rule. And the second thing, if they are genuinely believing in reform, why don't you authorize the government and do deliverables for them, and then we can hold them accountable?
General, you want to comment on that?
Sure. First of all, they are not running the show. The government is really the people that are running show. And I'm seeing the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister has the full power to do that. This is how it happens every day.
This must be a joke, right?
There is no one general is going to a Ministry of Trade and telling them, the minister, please stay away. I'm going to run your minister today.
The audience looks a bit skeptical, I have to say. I have to say.
It's a free country. They can do whatever they want. I'm happy with that.
I need to
No, I think we need to hear from the other side.
I mean,
actually.
the government can't even resign. It's not even allowed to resign, so it has no powers. Ask any diplomatic staff.
Would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, definitely. One thing I want to know, that they don't want to stay in power. They are fed up. And believe me, and I know that quite well. They want to go yesterday, not tomorrow. So extending the period is not in their favor at all. But the point is, as Dr. Gamal said, and I want to emphasize this point regarding, and Tim said that as well, that 6 months was the time for election, and they didn't do it because people wanted that. Because, and again, Heba said that they are not listening to any parties. They are sitting, and this is published every news in the newspapers, that they're sitting with the leaders of the parties and with the leaders at the politicians.
I would like to really object to this. I'm really sorry, but this is
every week.
Okay.
Sami
I'm really sorry, this is not happening.
Was there,
General
and he was
Sama.
talking to the people last week.
Okay.
And not only that.
You're talking
General,
about
just let him come
cosmetic
in.
dialogue that's being implemented by people from the SCAF and certain personnel from the parties. This is not political participation. This is not joint decision making. This is cosmetic processes for the media to come
They
and
were
see.
listening to them. It's not
And what?
cosmetic.
And do what? And
For,
then do
to
what?
do ideas. They
And do
told them,
what? And then
we don't want
with
election now
electoral-
because
with-
the new parties are not ready. Please give us some time
Of course
to have
they're not
some
ready
ground
because they have been
with the
just
people
established.
and then have the election. And
Yeah,
that's
but
why
what's
they listened to
happening is
them
that-
and they said, instead of 6 months, we'll give them some more time to have some power and to talk to the people and to get some
you
ground.
think political parties will
And
have
that's
power
why
in 6 months from today? You think political parties, don't you think that political parties need much more time to really work and establish themselves and spread over the country? What's happening is that what we are being given is a rubber stamp. We're being given this so-called political process of openness with these weak political parties, this upcoming parliament, and that's it. That's it. This is all what we're getting from the military. From before, it was very clear with a very simple example, like the electoral law, for instance. Each and every political entity in this country has specified the need for a certain electoral law, and the military still went ahead and did what it wanted.
Professor Sultan.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. I mean, yes, political parties have been demanded a specific kind of electoral law where party lists dominating or all the MPs are selected by party lists. But once 2/3 of the MPs are to be selected by that, we see political parties having difficulty filling lists. This is a problem here. The problem that we're having a political vacuum and political weakness, particularly at the side of the people who are supposed to be a genuine forces of democracy.
Okay, all right.
This is the dilemma that we are having
I'm going to take a question from the gentleman.
We cannot ignore that at all.
Okay, I'm going to take a question from the gentleman in the front row there.
I would like to ask the four people, what do you think, what is the next step? Let's assume that the military failed in everything, as you said, and we will ousting them.
I didn't say that.
And we will bring another one. Who is that one, and who is that foundation? And assume that you approve this foundation, you will approve. And what about the election? Are we going to vote for that foundation you choose? If we give a mark over 10 for the military as a trustful foundation, do we have any other foundation to give them a higher mark regarding the trust of leading the transitional period?
Thanks.
Okay, Mohammed Mansour.
I got the question. Thanks for your question. I think it's a very important question, but I don't think it's the right question to ask, to be honest. I mean, the military have been mandated with the responsibility of leading the transitional phase, which means that by virtue of the role is to put the establishment for the country afterwards. We're not talking about another power that will take their place and rule the country for God knows when. And we're not talking about foundations either. We're talking about a people, a society that has been put under extreme measures of repression and oppression for a very long time. And now it's about time for the people actually to take role. People through what? Through political parties, through NGOs, associations, political groupings, syndicates, open the room for these different entities to actually play a role in the country and not hinder their activities. We're not talking about, all right, the military goes now. No, we're saying that the military have been mandated and delegated with a certain responsibility of proper management and establishing the basis for
so you're saying it's not a question of who could do it better?
Tim.
Excuse me. You're saying it's not a question of who can do it better?
It doesn't have to be, no. It's a question of what should be done and why isn't it being done.
Please, would you like to come back on that?
Do we have the right to vote for anybody who will lead the transitional period?
But yes, but this is what we need. We need clarity. We need a timetable. We can't afford to have the military remain in power until June 2013. We need early presidential elections, and we need a parliament with powers, the power to appoint a government, the power to decide what position the military should have in the constitution, what oversight parliament should have of military budget, not a military that remains in power while these key decisions are made about the future of the country. This is what we need, a transition to civilian government.
Okay, I'm going to take...
I need to come on this, please.
You can have a brief comment, and then I'm going to go to a question of the gentleman in the third row.
Yeah, the terms used here about the army has been mandated and delegated to perform so and so. This is apolitical. This is not a political understanding of this reality. You cannot delegate an army to do the job for somebody else. The fact that the army
Why not? In a lot of countries, the military serves the politicians.
In democracies, this is the role of a military.
That's not where you want to go?
We want to do it, but in reality, in the current reality, we are not yet there. And once the military is in power, he is an actor among the others.
We can't hear.
We need to define the situation this
way.
way.
Let him just reply to you.
What kind of legitimacy do you think the military had on February 11th to rule this country? Hasn't it been stemmed from the people? Hasn't this legitimacy come from the people? If it weren't for the revolution, were the military to rule us now?
I think the
answer the question. I'm sorry.
The people and the revolutionary forces.
If the answer is no, then it's the people.
We can't have everybody speaking at once.
By themselves, and the fact that they didn't take it reflect that we are not a full-fledged revolution, and there are some a kind of a new factors there, the things that came with the revolution, and there is something inherited from the past continuity.
Okay.
This
Have
is the
a
military.
Moraif.
This is the political situation that we're
Okay,
living in.
let her answer you.
In March, the military asked us what nationality we'd like our president to have, what nationality the spouse of the president should have. Why did 77% of the population vote on this provision? If we're not going to see a president before a new constitution is drafted, that was the mandate given to the military to shift to presidential elections. It then ignored the referendum and went ahead with constitutional declaration anyway, but that was what people voted for, a return to elections and transition.
Here is that it's a power struggle between the different political forces and the military together to take us out of this transitional period. It is not the job of the military to do things for others.
You made that point. I'm going to take a question from the lady in the second row, please.
My question to the gentleman against the motion. Don't you think that genuine reform would actually threaten the status of the military institution? They are currently untouchable. And don't you think that they have forced Mubarak to step down? They sacrificed one to keep the institution with its benefits, with its status the same. And they are clinging to power not because they want to be at the head visible all the time, but they want to make sure that nobody threatens them, their interest, whether they're political, whether they're economic, whether they're security related. Don't you think this is the real reason why they're not
General Eliazar, can I come to you? Because a lot has been written in the press about the army's economic interests, and we've seen estimates as high as something like 40% of the economy that they control in some form or other. How keen are they to protect their economic positions and their privileges?
Okay, let me correct first. It's not 40%, it's 16 to 18%, and it's only in a small industry. You don't have a cement factory, or don't have steel factory or car factories. What they have is a bottled water factories, olive oil factories, garment factories. So they're not interested. That's what they do. That's reality. And dairy products. So they are not running. There is no banks belongs to the army. There is no heavy industry, or even mid to heavy industry belongs to them. So what they do now is 16 to 18% only from a very small industries, which they are keeping. And most of it goes to a special supermarkets, starting with they wanted to sell only these items to the military families, and then people said, no, we would like to buy it because it's a good quality with a good price. So everybody now can go and buy this kind of thing.
What about construction and
one
arms?
more thing.
Let him just come back to this.
I'm not really sure.
I didn't finish.
I'll give you a chance to finish, but
I think this is an underestimation of the economic role of the military in the country. We're talking about construction. We're talking about arms. We're talking about a lot of heavy industries that the army is involved in. The military factories. Okay. They do also other things in addition to the supermarkets and the rice.
So you don't want to have military factories because you want to buy all your arms from outside. So they are banned from trying to build their own
No, I'm not saying they should be banned. I'm saying these things
so,
exist.
No,
I'm just saying that they exist. I'm not saying that they should be banned.
One more issue. Yes, they do some contracting, and they do it very well. For instance, when you go to see the road from Cairo to Sukhna is the best, I think, highway in Egypt.
Really
and it's built by them, not because of making money, but because of serving people. That's the idea. They have these companies to serve people, not to make money. Because they don't want to make money out of it.
We're not questioning the
intention. They don't have any privilege. Give me one privilege they take.
I think the question was also about the special protections that the military will want for its economic interests moving forward. I think it's interesting that they amended the Code of Military Justice to give military prosecutors sole jurisdiction over any charges related to corruption within the military. I think Mamdouh Shahin...
Corruption in the military?
Name one. I wasn't saying that. I was saying...
Corruption, military?
I was saying
the
amendment to the Code of Military Justice said that any complaints related to corruption go to the military prosecutor. So the interest here is to centralize any...
So they want to protect themselves?
That's not...
Because they're doing many corruption, so they don't want anybody to know it, and that's why they're going to do it by themselves.
I'm saying
just
that this
to
is
hide
a reflection
of... Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying this is a reflection of the military's interests in preserving its own immunities. And General Mamdouh Shahin's comments back in June, I think, is very illustrative to this respect. He said that an army should not be subject to the whims of a new president, that you should have special immunities in the constitution, and that nothing related to the military budget should be discussed in the new parliament. I do see this as the army's attempt to protect its own economic interests.
They don't have any immunity. They not even allowed to go to polls and put their votes. They're banned from that by law. They cannot vote for anybody.
And I hope it will
That's
stay
what
this
they're
way.
doing now.
I hope it will stay this way. I'm just saying that
No,
these
this
are the
is the
comments by General Mamdouh Shahin at the time in terms of the constitution.
Okay,
so going forward.
I'm going to take a question from the gentleman in the middle there. Yes, you, sir. Yeah.
Thank you very much. If I'm serving the people and I'm really looking for their needs and respecting their revolutionary demands, then why till today I don't see one single initiative from the military or the caretaker government that supposedly they are directing the country to do so? So I would...
To do what?
To do the reforms, to move on and give me a plan. At the same time, I have to say on the other side that most of the political parties are fragmented in their leadership. And you have to realize that people were not going to wait for one single person to Minza to come to the street to talk to them. You have to go all and talk to them. Don't imitate Muslim Brotherhood, don't imitate military.
Okay.
Just go ahead and talk to people.
We're not negating that at all. Actually, I do agree with your points, and I thank you for it. What we're saying is it's not really logical for the military, or whichever authority in the country right now, to try and put these so-called political parties, which have been just established a few months ago, and say that this is our political reform. This is not enough by any means. This is not what the revolution wanted. This is not what the people that died for, really. It wasn't because that we wanted some so-called political entity on the street. Huh? We wanted more real, genuine reform.
Okay, Professor Sultan, you want to come in on this?
Again, it's we need better definition for the situation, and the polemics are not really leading this country one step ahead. The fact that the serious problem we're having is the fragmentation of the genuine democratic forces, and this is what leaves us with an unbalanced political arena with the army and the remnants of the old regime on the other hand, and the Islamic forces on the other hand. We are squeezed in between those, and we have to think politically, not just in legal, formal ways, about the role of the different parties, different actors, particularly the army. And I think if we begin as political parties, and you're representing one of them, thinking this way, perhaps we'll be able to search to find a kind of a constructive compromise ways out of this, rather than being squeezed again in this dilemma.
All right,
we have to stop blaming the others, and we have to think about how to see reality.
This is exactly my point, Tim, here. This is exactly my point. The military is saying that with these parties that are not yet really parties, they're still in the process of building, we have reform. What I'm arguing for is that, no, this is not reform. And the actual forces that made this revolution are still not in these parties, and it will take them a long time to be in these parties. So
it's their choice.
In addition, and it will take time, and it will happen. So the equation, the equation that you referred to is actually the military, the parties, and the people. The people that made this revolution are not yet mostly in parties.
It's
not
their
yet
choice.
With the military.
They didn't do it.
Okay.
We cannot force them to do it.
I'm not forcing them. I'm saying listen to them.
The challenge
they don't want to
listen
do it.
I'm asking myself based on that. In the coming election, when people are going to vote for assembly that will draft our constitution, who will be elected if the revolutionary forces, the new political parties, are not ready yet?
All right.
What kind of future is waiting for us?
Okay, I'm going to take one quick question from the lady in the front row there.
Yes, I'll ask the gentleman. You argue that the military is interested in real reform. Very briefly, how can you explain crushing people by military cars at Maspero and attacks on media? Thank you.
Sure. You know that the SCAF and government formed actually a committee headed by the Assistant Minister of Justice to come with a report very soon about the incident. And actually, there are 6 people in the committee headed by the Assistant Minister of Justice and 3 other judges with him in the same committee. And they will come back with the report. So I think you are now just before reading and hearing what they're going to say, you judged already that the army did that. Let me tell you, we have a video, and I don't like to publicize that, but in many Facebook sites, you can go and watch a guy, I don't want to say his name, he's working for another TV channel, and he said, I saw, and he filmed that, a red T-shirt guy actually driving the armored vehicle who actually crushed people.
Sir, can I...
Go and look at it.
This is the Egyptian army. You're telling me that the Egyptian... This is the Egyptian army. You're telling me that the Egyptian army, their car will be robbed just like my car gets robbed? Yes. I'm sorry, it's not convincing. Actually, if this happened, this is a sign of the poor security that the army is perpetuating.
By 10 people on the floor.
This is a sign of the poor security. If the army can be robbed, then this is a sign of the poor security that we are all living under, and that's in of itself
can I tell
proof
you something?
of failure of
you will never see this again. Promise you. You will never see this again.
On that
because
note,
they will treat it differently next time.
Okay.
If there is a next time.
Okay.
Hopefully
On
not.
that note, we're coming close to the end of our time. We're coming close to the end of our time. I'm going to ask each of the panelists if they can crystallize their views just before you go to the vote, to sum up their opinions and to give you one sentence each, and we're going to start at this end of the table and we'll go back through the general. Just one sentence. Mohammed Mansa, you start, please. One sentence.
Ladies and gentlemen, from what has been said today, the military is not interested in real or genuine reform. Apparently, the revolution is still going and needs to be going further, and the people need to be part of it further and further. So the military apparently is not interested in real and genuine reform.
The military isn't interested in genuine reform because of its own involvement in the abuses, its failure to respond to them by investigating and prosecuting, its failure to uphold genuine reform that would actually change the practices that everybody rebelled against in January.
Professor Sultan, one sentence.
It is not about the actual violations, and a lot of violations are taking place. It's about the role that the army is functionally performing in taking care, in pushing the case for reform in this country. And I think functionally they do. There are a lot of mistakes, but functionally, considering how the configuration of political forces are, Islamism, liberals, and the people are, I think they serve a good cause towards reform.
General Saif Eliazar.
What we're doing now is we're taking one mistake or one issue and we're talking about it and trying to make a snowball out of it. Let's see the entire picture and judge the entire picture. If we judge that, maybe 70–80% was with the decisions they made. I think it's correct. The rest, I have some hesitation.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the point now we're going to vote on the motion. This House believes the Egyptian military is not interested in genuine reform. Would you please take your voting machines? Let me just explain to you how they work. If you want to vote for the motion, that is the side represented by those on my right, you're going to need in a moment to press the number 1 button. If you want to vote against the motion, that is the side represented by those on my left, you press button 2, and whichever button it is that you want to press, please do it now. You only have to press once. Thanks to the miracles of modern science, your vote will be communicated to the computers, and we should have the result for you in about 15 seconds. There's the vote. 84.7% for the motion, 15.3% against. The motion has been resoundingly carried. All it remains for me to do is to thank our distinguished speakers. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you to you, the audience. The Doha debates will be back again next month. Till then, from all of us here in Cairo, have a safe journey home. Thanks for coming. Good night.